This video will be on multiplying, and dividing rational expressions. Before we actually do any of those, just let me remind you of two rules of fractions. I know it's everybody's favorite, but two rules of fractions, since a rational expression is basically a fancy fraction. Let me just remind you how we do a couple things with fractions. So if I have 1/2 times 3/2, the way that we multiply fractions is we multiply them straight across. So the answer would be 3/4. And when it comes to dividing, if I had the same thing, 1/2, but instead I was dividing by 3/2, I would multiply by the reciprocal of the second one. It's always the second one. I have students ask me all the time, why can't it be the first? It's because you are dividing by 3/2, and therefore it's the denominator. So you multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator. So 1/2 times 2/3, and the 2's could reduce to 1 and 1, and now you multiply straight across, and it would get you 1/3. And so that's how you multiply, and this is how you divide fractions. Dividing fractions, you just multiply by the reciprocal of the second. Alright, so now that you got your two basic rules down for fractions, let's get to it. Here we go. Let's look at this problem number 1 where we are multiplying. So it says x squared minus x minus 6 over x squared plus 6x plus 9 times x plus 3 over x squared minus 4. One thing that you need to know about this is if you just start reducing things that you think can reduce, like some students will think that the 2x squareds over each other can be just reduced to 1. That actually is untrue. You actually have to factor first everything that you could possibly factor, and then you can reduce, because these things are being divided, and therefore you have to have them being multiplied on top and bottom before you can actually reduce. So the top of the first fraction factors to x minus 3 and x plus 2 over the bottom of the first fraction factors to x plus 3 times x plus 3, and then times the top stays the same as x plus 3, and the bottom of the second one is x plus 2, x minus 2. Now, just as before in the other problem, if you have the same thing on numerator and denominator, you can reduce. So I have 1x plus 3 on top and 1x plus 3 on the bottom, and they reduce to 1 and 1. And then I have an x plus 2 on top and on bottom, so that reduces to 1 and 1. Now that everything's been reduced, I can multiply straight across. So x minus 3 times 1 is just x minus 3. And then x plus 3 times 1 times x minus 2 is x plus 3 times x minus 2. And if you have a nice teacher like me, he'll let you leave it like that because it's pretty much as far as you can go. But if you have a teacher who wants you to show some work, just got updated on some noisy stuff on my phone, SportsCenter. But if you have to multiply it out, then feel free to multiply it out and you just FOIL the bottom. But nothing's going to cross out. This is your final answer, and that's how you would multiply rational expressions. Make sure that you factor first, and then you can reduce similar factors. Alright, so let's check out division. So we would have, let's take for example, x squared, number 2, Oh, there it is again. X squared minus 36 over x, and then divided by x cubed minus 6x squared over x squared plus x. Alright, first thing you're going to do, once again, is factor. So, I'm going to factor the top, that'd be x minus 6 and x plus 6. The bottom's going to stay x. And then we would divide by, this factored is x squared, and then take out the x squared as my GCF, and then be x minus 6. And then x is my GCF, and x plus 1. Now I can multiply by the reciprocal, of the second one. So you're going to flip the second one, so times, it'll be x times x plus 1 on top now, and x squared times x minus 6 on the bottom. And the first one stays the same, so x minus 6 and then x plus 6 all over x. And now you're once again going to multiply straight across, but before you do that, you can reduce similar factors. So x and x minus 6 and x minus 6 reduce to 1 and 1, 1 and 1, right? It's good to write the ones in, and the reason I do that is because you don't want to think that there's a 0 on the bottom of that first fraction. And then we can multiply straight across. So on top you would have x plus 6, x plus 1, and on bottom we would just have x squared. And if it didn't reduce, and just to close this out, if it doesn't reduce here, as long as you reduce everything correctly and factored everything correctly, if it doesn't reduce here, then it's not going to reduce here. And so the tendency some students have is to multiply out the numerator and then cross off x squareds, but that would actually be poor math. So this is it right there. That's what you're rolling with. So have a great day.